I wasn't going to talk about this, but people are just annoying me now, and I have to put in my pointless 2 cents to the whole thing. So, YCS Bochum concluded this weekend, or last weekend, just gone, since I'm making this video. And it's safe to say it's probably one of the most diverse set of top 32 and just in general tournament standings and showings and representation of decks that we've had for one of the longest times. There were so many different decks in the top 32, and the top 4, there was one deck for each. There was no same deck, there was no multiples. There were 4 different decks in the top 4, which to me is beautiful. It symbolizes diversity in this game and this format specifically. The game, you can say what you want, but in this format right now, we are incredibly diverse in the decks that are viable, that people can use, and the strategies that are there to be used. However, you would think people are happy about such diversity. And you would think that people are enjoying the fact that they are seeing different things. You know, World Chalice won. No one would have put a bet on that at all. However, no, they are not happy. 2 of the decks in the top 32 are an FTK deck. It's the Pendulum FTK, and I think it was a Gem Knight FTK was the other one. So there's one single FTK for Pendulum, and I believe the other one was Gem Knight. Even if it isn't, it was 2 pendulums, one or the other. I'm not entirely sure, I can't remember off the top of my head. It's not worth even bothering to look up. However, this apparently is enough. 2 decks out of 32. So that's 30 other decks are different things. That is enough for people to throw their fucking toys out of the pram, everyone to go mental and say FTK decks are broken, FTK decks are the worst thing in humanity, they need to be destroyed, they need to be e-banned, they need to be stopped. Shut up! Like, seriously, I'm sorry, but it's really not what you think it is. It is not this most broken thing in the entire world. I think an FTK Pendulum deck topped in another regional or in another event in, I think it was a big regional or national, something like that, I can't remember, in America. But there was a perfect quote by one of the people who was playing Pendulums in, I think it was top 4. Or it was top 8 at least at Bochum. And his quote was perfect. People said, why aren't you playing the Pendulum FTK version? Why are you not playing, you know, that version? It's amazing. His quote was, because it's not consistent enough. This is literally why this deck isn't a problem. This is literally why it will not cause a problem for people. It is not consistent enough. One deck, if it was Pendulum, one deck, and if it was 2 pendulums, then 2 out of 32 other decks is not a thing to be worried about. It's just that. I really don't think people need to worry. And at the end of the day, pendulums are something that you need to pay attention to anyway. Everyone is using hand traps, and everyone is maining them. If you are not maining hand traps because A, you don't want to, then that's your own fault. B, if you can't afford them, that's a bit of a weird one, because obviously I'm an advocate for casual players and we don't necessarily dump loads of money, or the casual players don't necessarily dump money onto the game. But at the end of the day, if you aren't playing the top cards that counter those types of decks, then I'm sorry, but you are going to possibly run into those problems and potentially get FTKs. But they have to draw those cards first. They have to do all of that, and then there has to be no response from you. They also have to win the die roll. So there's a few elements there that will stop them possibly dead in their tracks. If you go first and you have any form of response to what they're doing, game to you. If you have hand traps that stop them, game to you. Like, this is what I don't see as a problem, because the fun of the game is that there are so many different decks around, and I don't know why I've just picked these up to shuffle. It's just irritating. It's just mind-boggling to me that no matter what happens, no matter how perfect this potential format is, and this format is about as perfect as you're going to get for diversity, for different decks, and to not get bored and to have fun, because let's not forget, this game is meant to be fun, that people will still complain. And I know you might say, well, AlintheaYoh, people are never going to be happy. Even with the ban list, there was an amazing ban list and people still moaned about it. Well, yeah, I realised that there's always going to be people who, don't like or aren't happy with what Konami do. But the problem is people are getting, excuse me, their knickers in a twist for something they don't need to get their knickers in a twist about. I need water. FTKs are not a problem in this game right now. Konami do their best to address such problems. I think it was YCS Prague or something that we had the Monarch FTK that came up, which is basically the basic magical explosion version, but it was with Monarch engine. That got hit pretty quickly. And that was barely like, that was pretty degenerate, but it was barely like there. It was like a big shock and then everyone started paying loads of attention to it and then they hit it. Which you can basically say whether or not it was something that they should have done. But at the end of the day, it's not a problem. FTKs are not a problem. They are a part of this game, whether you like it or not. And ever since this game's inception, there have been FTKs. Because such things like Exodia exist. That was one of the first basic decks that could potentially FTK. And, with Machiora the Destructor, with all the drawing, that was one of them. There was just general deep draw Exodia, that was another one. There's just been so many, and then if you just take Exodia out of it, there's been Fishbowl Blaster, there's just, fish OTKs. There's been Explosion FTKs, there's been so many. It's a part of this game and people need to understand that. Stop being so bloody butthurt about the entire thing. I'm actually quite surprised at how many people have jumped on this saying that it is a problem. I don't know if it's just for the views or whatever, but I actually don't think it's a problem at all. And you might dislike this video, disagree with me, all that stuff, but at the end of the day, if you are going into a tournament, there is one deck that you should always be on the lookout for, and that is Chainburn. Chainburn will, while they might not have the potential to FTK you, or OTK you, it's one of those curveball decks that you are expected to come into contact with. And if you go into a main tournament and you start going XO, as you progress through those first 3 rounds, you're probably going to come up against, even 4 maybe, you're going to come up against Rogue. And FTK is Rogue. That's basically it. Until someone shows me when FTK decks, and that single FTK deck starts taking about 40% of a top cut, even, hey, why not? Even 30% of a top cut, then you need to basically tell me and I'll pay attention. Until then, I'm not paying attention. FTKs are fine, they're not a problem. They don't really need to be addressed. They will always be unfavorable in matchups. If they go seconds, they're in trouble. If they don't, get the cards, if they brick, they're in trouble. And they are potentially more, just on average, they're more brickable than the average meta deck that is around. So honestly, I don't think it's a problem. People need to chill the fuck out. It's honestly fine. Don't worry about it. Just forget about it. If you're really that worried about it, main for it and you'll never come up against it. And even if you just side for it, you'll probably just, come up against it eventually. That's sod's law how it works. You main for main decks. This happens to me all the time. I go into a tournament with mained outs to meta decks and never see a meta deck ever in that entire tournament. Really annoying that. But I really don't see why people, why is it a problem? I get that people understand, well, people say that this game is all about interaction, and I agree. The game is about interaction. That it's boring if someone plays solitaire, and I'm not supporting FTK decks by any stretch of the imagination. I don't particularly like them, but they are just something that is an interesting deck nonetheless. I don't like going up against it and just sitting there for like 20-30 minutes and just being like, cool, so I assume, yep, game 1 to you, and then we've got nothing left. That isn't a good thing. I think there was the Electrum OTK or FTK that took about 20 years to do, and there was a Gishki one as well that I think took a very long time too, and the people who come up with these decks basically have no life. But it's just one of those things that happens, and with the amount of cards that we have in the card pool that are available to us, FTKs will always happen. People will always find a way. Until something like set rotation comes in, and if set rotation came in, then I would quit. But it was a bad idea. Just set rotation would never work for this game. Anyway, tangents going off. FTKs are not a problem. They will always be around regardless. It has been a little bit of a while since we had an FTK show up on the main scene. The last one, I believe, was the Monarch FTK deck, the Magical Explosion one, and that got addressed pretty quickly. That was in, what, 2015, 16, I think. Since then, there hasn't been anything. It's literally taken a couple... It's the exact same. This FTK showing and the results it's getting is basically the equivalent of a rogue deck getting into the top cuts. That's all it is. And if you compare it with other decks like that have made top cuts previously, that have just been in 1 or 2 showing, that's literally the definition of rogue getting there. And yes, people can get very lucky and go through and win an entire tournament just on the sole basis of luck. You can argue that a World Chalice should not have won simply because of the way that the deck is. And I'm not discrediting the deck at all. I don't know enough about the deck to comment on the exact key details of it, but no one would have expected a World Chalice to win. Let's face it. Why is that? Because people don't think it's the top tier meta deck. So then either everyone's wrong or there is an element of luck there. And I believe he said there were some elements of luck that he had throughout the day. So, elements of luck. That is what FTK decks really rely on. Because let's not face it, the fundamentals of an FTK deck, 2 of them. 1, don't brick. 2, go first. That's some pretty big situations that need to happen and need to go for the player to be able to actually happen. And if the reason why I don't play FTK decks as well is because I just don't want to, and also I have incredibly bad luck, so I never win the dice rolls really. About probably 9 times out of 10 I'll lose it. So it's a good example. Some people just can't play them. Some people just really don't need to worry about it. The community really doesn't need to worry about it, and people should probably really stop talking about it. I realise making a video about this has just basically poured fuel on the fire, but the fire was already a bonfire, and it's not really a problem because, you know, everyone's talking about it. So that's my 2 cents, because it was annoying me at this point. I just kept seeing it constantly over and over again. I just thought this weekend, with the results, with the decks that were showing and the amount of just diversity, it was amazing. I expected people just to be like, hey, it's just a smattering. But no, people still need to moan. People still need to learn just to stop blowing things out of proportion, because it's not that bad.